Welcome everybody to Cloud Conversations with Rue and Pete. This is episode 18. My name is Peter Rising. I am delighted to be joined as ever by my partner in crime, Rue Campbell. And how are you today, Rue? How's things been going?
Yeah, all good here. Kind of like every other person in the country, just trying to cope with the heat wave. Al, our guest, who I'll introduce in a little second, he was just kind of making me jealous, saying that down his neck of the woods things are getting a little bit better, and I can't wait for that. So if you start seeing sweat patches on my t-shirt and all that as we record, that's why, because it's blimmin' roasting up here.
That's why I always wear black.
Yeah, absolutely. I like your style. That's problem solving. That's what that is. So I guess let's storm ahead. So we're joined today by Al Eardley, who recently started with Microsoft as a modern work and security technical architect. Prior to that, working with CPS as a solutions architect, I believe, or head of something like that. I know it was quite
a workplace.
Head of something, yeah. Modern workplace and Power Platform and various things.
Great stuff. So nice to have you, Al. Can you just kind of give folks a little bit of background about yourself?
Yeah, so I've joined Microsoft about 3 months ago now. So I joined in the Microsoft Technology Centre, which is one of the few places in the UK that's a cross-functional area. So it gives me an opportunity to kind of use a lot of my modern work, security, compliance, Power Platform experience, and really help customers understand how they can use the technology, giving them sort of immersive experience and deep technical guidance as well. So it's been a bit of a journey over the last 3 months. Just joining Microsoft, I knew it'd be interesting. But yeah, I mean it's been fantastic. So yeah, really interesting way to spend your time day in, day out working with some really interesting clients.
The MTC. Now, I always think the Microsoft technical community for that. So we've got some acronym wars going on there. But so it's the Microsoft Technology Center and the MTC.
Yep. Yeah, and I know what you mean. There's, as with Microsoft, if you've worked with Microsoft, I worked with Microsoft for well over 10 years on the other side in the partner space, and you kind of get to hear all of these TLAs, the 3-letter acronyms, and jumping into it, it's kind of like, okay, I need to actually know what they mean now. That's the first challenge. What do people actually mean with all of these acronyms?
For sure. And how have you found joining Microsoft in this era that we're in? I mean, obviously, Microsoft has really set the tone for kind of helping folk get through this remote work thing. So how's the onboarding process been and everything for you?
It was really interesting because the technology center is kind of isolated. It's got its own sort of space dedicated to it at TVP in Reading. And the first day I actually went into the office, which was, it was longer than I'd not been into CPS where I used to work before for so long. So it was kind of weird, starting a new job, but also going into the office as well. But we've been going in a few times. We've been doing stuff around hybrid working and presenting stuff. So we've got a sort of a dedicated sort of envisioning theatre that we can all be in and be socially distanced and actually present from as well. So we've actually been going in more over the last couple of months than I did, for the previous year. Which it's good. It's I've actually met the team. I know how tall they are and everything. It's really good.
That is so funny because Rue and I have both recently started at a new partner as well, the same place. And one of my team, I head up a modern workplace team. I was talking to him yesterday, and he says, "When you meet me, don't be shocked because I'm 6'7". So you just don't know, do you? You just see people from
all you see is the chest up, isn't it? So
yeah. But I can't imagine going into the offices though. How have you found the commuting? Because I remember you saying to me not so long ago, the first time you went in, I think you hadn't driven for so long for a period of time that your right foot hurt.
Yeah, my right leg hurt from actually using it. It's like, okay, I've been driving a little bit to go out and go walking and stuff, but it was kind of like, oh, I'm actually on a motorway and actually doing stuff, going somewhere. But the commute's been fine. I mean, it's one of the reasons I took the role is, I live close enough to Reading and close enough to Paddington that I can get to both places quite quickly and easily. So the commuting's not been too bad. The traffic, I don't think, is anywhere close to pre-pandemic levels. So that's always good. Yeah, I don't miss long distance driving or anything like that. It was never a fun part of the role.
Yep,
No,
agreed. Yep,
definitely.
agreed. You got to assume that a lot of the space we're in and a lot of our viewers are in, which is kind of, consultancy or the partner space, you have to assume that even when things go back to normal, whatever that looks like, the travel has to fall, both for our well-being and then also the expense and the time and all that stuff that we'll just save.
I mean, I think so many organisations have probably realised how much they were investing in having consultants on site. There was always some organisations who wanted to have bums on seats so they could see that stuff was happening. But then there are other organisations who are saying, well, actually, come down when you're doing workshops, when it's really important. And then we don't really want to pay for the expense of you coming down and just being here, or we don't have the space. And I think, a lot of organisations are now realising they can engage remotely as well as have their staff remotely. And, when you start to give them the prospect of, yes, you've got to pay for hotels, for consultants and partners to be on site, that will put them off because they'll be saying, well, actually, it's a whole lot cheaper without that cost. So, yeah, I think there'll be a lot less travel. And, environmentally, a lot more organisations, I think, are thinking about the environmental impact. The statements they want to be putting out is how they help the environment, not how they force people to travel so far every week.
Yeah, absolutely. And, air travel is such a big contributor to that, so if you could put out in your public statements that we're reducing our business air travel by XYZ miles, that's going to help.
Yeah,
it's got to be a good thing, hasn't it? Yep, without a doubt. Now, one thing I want to ask you, actually, Al, is much like another recent guest of ours, Jimmy Vaughan, you, in joining Microsoft, had the difficult, I'd imagine, decision of having to retire your former MVP now, give up your Microsoft MVP. How was that for you? Is that something you found difficult, agonized over, or?
It was definitely part of the decision-making process because it's, as you know, it's not an easy thing to achieve the MVP status. But on the other hand, I knew that, actually the reason that I became an MVP was not to become an MVP. It was because I was doing things that I enjoy in terms of the community work. So, the running user groups, presenting at conferences, presenting at user groups, I have made use of the community for, forever. And giving back seems like the right thing to do. So the MVP status was actually, something on top of that, which was a bonus. But actually the part that I enjoyed is actually presenting. And I think, as an MVP, you get more contact with the product groups and things, and joining Microsoft, that's balanced out. So yeah, it wasn't actually, it was a consideration, but a very, very short consideration, because actually, I want to carry on doing what I was doing before. And, part of the role that I'm in is evangelizing what we do in terms of Microsoft, but also, carrying on and having a profile that is hopefully reasonably good, but also sharing the knowledge. So yeah, it wasn't too much of a factor.
How just kind of reversing a little bit, how did you end up in the kind of tech industry or the space that you're in at the minute? Doing my kind of pre-show stalking of your LinkedIn, I pieced together a few wee things, but there's always an interesting backstory there. So how did you start your career?
Well, this goes back quite a long way, because I originally, when I finished school, was thinking I was going to be doing mechanical engineering. And so I started a degree in mechanical engineering. So I started a what was that one? That was a BEng in mechanical engineering, so a Bachelor of Engineering. And I found it really boring. I enjoyed the maths, but it was really quite dull. So I stopped doing that. And my parents said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I have no idea. So we went to something to try and work out where my aptitude was. And they said, well, yeah, engineering's great, but you need something more creative. So like a pendulum, I went from one side way over to the other, and I did an art foundation course. So completely different from engineering. But I was kind of making sculptures based on equations. So taking Newton's laws and Hooke's laws and making sculptures. So really kind of taking the engineering stuff, but using it artistically. And then I actually started a BA, Bachelor of Arts, in jewellery design. So, the pendulum had really swung the other way.
Wow,
But then
yeah.
so I wanted to do stuff on sort of locks and keys and mechanical based stuff, and they said, no, you've got to paint and use color and paint nature. And I was kind of like, yeah, no, this isn't going to work. This isn't really going to work. And at that point, I was like, well, what am I going to do? So I figured, actually, computers. This was the early 90s. I figured computers was probably a good place to go, because there's going to be some engineering and there's going to be some stuff that's going to be creative. So I then started on the third degree, Bachelor of Engineering, in computer engineering, and so did that, and managed to land on my feet coming out of that, and got a job doing sort of programming and databases. Managed to then move into, just as the web was starting to take off, into looking after an online application. So this was back about 2000. Looking at what would now be called a SaaS solution, back in the days before you had the cloud and before you had SaaS. So yeah, a lot of development, a lot of databases, BI, design, and then weirdly, whilst I was doing that, I started going to conferences and SQL bits and things like that for the BI side of things, and I saw SharePoint being used to demonstrate presenting the BI stuff. And so I was like, SharePoint, now that looks like quite an interesting tool. So this was 2007, 8. So I then made the jump to move over to using SharePoint, and actually started in a consultancy, actually as a project manager, weirdly, the SharePoint consultancy, and then found that I knew more technically than a lot of the staff that I was working with. So gravitated back towards the technology and haven't really looked back since. In terms of looking at all the Microsoft stack, the whole of the sort of SharePoint ecosystem, and how that's evolved into what was then BPOS, and then Office 365, and now Microsoft 365. I'm picking up all sorts of bits and pieces along the way. So awesome. It's been a bit of a journey, you might say. But it's been quite interesting, because it's that creativity part has always served me really well for, using tools like design thinking and designing things, that's always served really well.
I was going to say, because kind of hearing it back, and you mentioned how you found that, I think the word you used was kind of boring around the engineering side, and then you mentioned you moved into database development, and in my head I'm kind of bouncing those things off each other, saying how can that be more exciting? But then the creativity part of it's interesting, because I guess at the end of the day it's problem solving, but you're putting your own mold on it, going back to the sculpture thing, right?
Yeah, and I think every developer is a problem solver. Every developer is trying to work out, actually, how do I develop something that's going to carry out a function, and what tools do I have, and how do I bring those pieces together into a solution that's going to work. So by its very nature, development is problem solving. And the more creative you can be, the more interesting your solutions are, and that becomes even more important now when you're sort of thinking about all of the tools that are available. Back in when I started development, I'd be given, right, here's your database, here's your one programming language that you can use, and your one stack of services that you can use. Go build a solution. Now, I look at clients and I say, okay, well, what's your problem? And they say, oh, well, I need to, scan ID cards and work out whether somebody's entitled to something. Okay, well, so you could be using a mobile device, you could be using, the Power Platform, you could be using cognitive services, you could be scanning images. There's so much choice that you have to be quite creative in how you bring all of those decisions together to come up with the right solution that's going to work, going to be cost effective, going to be supportable, all of those sorts of things. So it's quite an interesting creative challenge now, that I think most IT folks are more creative than they give themselves credit for, because they are assessing everything and making a decision.
And I think you have to be quite adaptable as well, don't you, in the IT industry, because it's always changing and evolving. And that, in a sense, does not surprise me that so many people we talk to on the show have a similar story to you, and that where they've ended up is not where they planned starting out, so they've adapted and changed and adjusted along the way. So we hear so many similar stories. It's quite remarkable.
I think it's so much easier to find things you don't like doing than to find things you do like doing. If you get that first time, you're really lucky, aren't you? But I think that's it, isn't it? Most people don't know. When you're young, you don't know what's available out there. You don't know what the opportunities are. What
you want to do. And a lot of it we find so often, certainly it was in my case, and in so many of the stories we hear, it's luck and timing, right place at the right time. And just grabbing that opportunity when it comes your way, and betting on yourself. That's the real key to it.
Don't be afraid to put your hand up and volunteer for something that's pushing your comfort zone. Otherwise,
exactly.
That's one thing that I've always kind of gone, that looks quite interesting. I'm going to spend the time finding out about that, and then I'm going to try and bring it back and go, and this will help us in some way. Which I've always asked all of my staff, anyone who's worked for me, to go, put your hand up. Don't be afraid, because you'll never learn and develop.
Yeah,
exactly. No such thing as a stupid question.
Yeah, for sure. And I know one thing that Pete's kind of always told me is, if maybe you can't necessarily do something at the minute, but let's say you want to be able to do it, just don't say you can do it, but volunteer, you know what I mean? And just put the work in, figure it out, and then go and do it. Because you have to, in a way, if you volunteer to then start doing something that you're maybe not entirely comfortable with, it lights a spark under you where you get that, in a way, that kind of good stress where you're like, okay, I really need to get on top of this.
Yeah.
And then deliver it.
Yeah, and it gives you such a buzz when you achieve that, doesn't it? It gives you that extra buzz that you've done something out of your comfort zone and achieved that, and it's really special.
Yeah, getting something working is one thing, but learning how to do it from scratch is a whole different achievement, isn't it? That you kind of go, that was great, I can now do that. But then I think, in this day and age, there are no experts. I've been doing this for a very long time, but actually I know people who are 20 years younger than me who've been doing some of this technology for exactly the same amount of time that I have and know far more about it. There's no expert in terms of, give me 10 years of Power Platform experience. You can't do that now. And that's the thing. Everybody who's learning, they are equally as experienced and as those of us who are slightly longer in the tooth, but we maybe have slightly different experience, but they know the technology.
Well, this is something
that's true.
Yeah, this is something that when me and Pete had Tej Lacombe on the show, and I can't remember his age off the top of my head. He can jump in and
frighteningly young.
Absolutely. But then I think about something like Azure Sentinel, which he does a lot of work with, and it's quite a young product in itself. So it's this constant rate of change and evolution in the cloud. The guys who have been working in IT for 20 years, they've maybe got more of experience in terms of the soft skills that you need. But in terms of the tech stuff, it's really quite, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's certainly achievable to become an expert in some new piece of tech relative to other folks now, just because of the rate of change.
I think, the experience, you talk about experience and then you talk about wisdom. And if you talk about experience, you've got 5 years of experience, but you've got 20 years of wisdom. And the wisdom is the application of that experience to certain situations. And if you think about, Tice, he's got 5, however long he's been working with Sentinel for the last 2-3 years since it's been out. But other people might have more experience of using SIEM systems and the security and the use and the application. But he's got the technical experience, and you've got to have that complement, don't you, to say, actually, how can we bring those two sets of experience together, both the long-term wisdom and the technical experience. That way you get a superpower out of that, which is the application of it, which is great.
I find that principle applies to some of the customers that we work with as well. When you're working on modern workplace, digital transformation projects, you've got to take in mind the whole workforce from a generational standpoint, how it's going to affect those users, because many of them will be a bit longer on the tooth, like my good self, of a certain generation. And then you've got more young guns coming out who have grown up with technology. They've learned it at school. It's just something that they're familiar with and more comfortable with than other generations, shall we say. And you've got to take that into consideration when putting these new technologies in front of of your customers, how they're going to react to that. It's interesting to see how people find it more challenging than others sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? You're always going to have different audiences who are going to have different challenges when they're adopting some of this. I remember working with an organization, a charity, and they were trying to get this tool rolled out, and it was difficult for them because their users, they really weren't interested. They wanted to just get on and do the job that they were passionate about, not worry about the technology. And so it was a real challenge to do that change and adoption piece. The technology was fine, but it was just getting it implemented, which was a challenge.
Yeah. And I've found that as well. I worked on a project recently with a number of academic institutions on Azure MFA, and you find that as well insofar as for folks who, let's say they've grown up with the kind of consumer services where they're MFAing to get into their Amazon, their eBay, their bank, that's all fine. Then the folks that maybe haven't grown up with that and aren't familiar with that, you ask them to install an app on their phone to do with work, and it becomes a bit, you can spy on me now, And
yeah.
My guess is these things will flesh out over time, but it's a challenge to overcome.
Yeah, and it's that. Well, why do I have to put something on my phone? This is my phone. This isn't your phone. This isn't to do with work. This is my personal phone. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I always have fun with that conversation because it's like, well, you drive to work in your own car. You do things that are your personal property, but they're still associated with your work. It's not like your employer has to buy you a bus to get to work. We don't have to buy you a phone just because we need you to MFA. And it's a cultural thing, and it's a generational thing, I think.
Yeah,
definitely. Let's shift gears a little bit. I'd like to talk a bit about GreyHatBeard. So much like Rue and myself, you are part of a similar podcast stroke YouTube show, whatever you want to call it, and have to congratulate yourself and Kev and Gary, who you have that show with, on being recently nominated for the Commsverse Best Codpast.
Codpast. That's a new one. Yeah.
There you go. There's a spoonerism for you. Podcast award, which was richly deserved. There was a lot of strong competition in that category, but it was great to see you guys up there. But tell us a little bit about GreyHatBeard, who your partners in crime are with that, and how it came about, and what you're looking to do with it.
Oh, so GreyHatBeard came about about almost 18 months ago, I think. At the time, Kev, Gary, and I were all working in the same place, and we all, enjoyed having conversations about technology, discussing what was going on. So, yeah, Kev came up with the idea of having a podcast. The name was kind of, I tend to wear a hat if I'm out and about. Gary's got a beard and Kevin's got grey hair, quite simple. But yeah, I mean, we started it to focus on sort of modern work, Microsoft 365, and to really just have a conversation about what was going on, what we were thinking about, what was happening in the news, because there's always so much going on, isn't there? There's, the roadmap, but there's also things that were catching our eye that we thought was interesting, that people would be interested in. And then we started bringing guests in to have it about certain subjects. And yeah, it's been something that we've really enjoyed doing. It's great for us to keep abreast of what's going on. We all kind of have slightly different areas of interest as well, so we can bring together quite diverse conversations and news articles. So sometimes you'll hear Kevin and Gary talking more about development, and I'll be just somewhat more quiet because I'm not allowed to do development anymore. And then sometimes we're talking about security and compliance and or Power Platform. We like to be quite diverse about what we're talking about, and basically just have a good natter and just see where the conversation takes us. And I think it's proved reasonably popular. But actually, we just enjoy having a chat every couple of weeks and just getting together. And since I've moved to Microsoft, it's a great way for us to stay in contact and to carry on having our conversations. So yeah, it's good. And it also gives us a chance to bring people in and have more interesting conversations about areas that we don't necessarily know so much about.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, speaking selfishly, when myself and Peter had that initial discussion about starting a podcast, I just looked at it very selfishly, and I thought, well, even if we don't get any viewers, it gives me a chance to talk to some folks, you know what I mean, and meet people, find out stuff I don't know anything about. I can phrase questions in a way that I'm asking on behalf of other folks, so I don't look like the person asking the stupid question.
Asking for a friend.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So yeah, no, it's just a great experience. And one thing I really like about your show is it's just, geez, how would I describe it? It's a very easy listening show. You know, I can just kind of put it on in the background while I'm working, and at the same time, you guys go through all the recent news and all that kind of stuff, which is it's nice. It's just nice to keep in the loop with that.
I think it's always interesting because when people listen to podcasts, you know, when they're commuting was a very popular time, and now I think it's funny, there's more podcasts now, but there's more people listening to them, you know, when they're exercising, when they're, you know, as you say, in the background. So I think it's a good way to stay up to date with everything when you're not necessarily, you know, just stuck to Twitter or LinkedIn or what other sources. You know, it's great to kind of hear about what's going on, and that's really useful for a lot of people, I think, you know, just to understand the technology and where changes are coming.
And I like how you make it accessible as well. The three of you, you've between you individually and collectively, you've got a great way of making what you're describing very accessible to everyone, for people who are not necessarily into the development side of things like me. It's I get that, the way Gary said that, or the way you or Kev have said that, and it's fun to hear you evangelize your particular areas of interest as well. I mean, especially Kev is so passionate about things like Microsoft Search and Viva and things like that. So it's I love hearing that passion. That's one of the great things that comes out of the show as well, for sure.
I think with all three of us, we all have that different interest as well. So there's always, you know, oh, well, sorry, what does that actually mean? I didn't see anything about that, you know. Tell me more about that. And we're almost explaining it to ourselves, so and to each other, because, you know, there is too much for any one person to be, you know, staying on top of everything. So it's a great way to kind of go, yeah, I've not heard anything about that. Explain that. If we understand it, then we hope other people understand it as well, because, you know, we're trying to keep it from a consultancy perspective. We want to explain it to everybody, not just to the technical insiders.
Yep. Just kind of thinking more about the kind of things you do within our little community, and I guess this is probably a question for the both of you guys. You, I think it was early this year, maybe the tail end of last year, you started the Microsoft 365 Security and Compliance User Group. Mouthful, nailed
Rolls
it.
off the tongue, doesn't it?
Yep. I'm not going to use the TLA for it, because that'll defrag my brain. But I guess one of the things that was kind of surprising to me was that was really filling a little bit of a void, because there's so many user groups, and there's things for, you know, for like end user compute. We'll talk about Power Platform as well, and for programming, things like that. But kind of to my surprise, there wasn't really, at least that I was aware of, one in that space, despite it being such an important element of IT security. What kind of brought about the security and compliance user group for you guys?
I think you're right there. It's a really big area, and it's really important, and it's a really, you know, it's massively important. But actually, you know, whenever I spoke to customers about it, it would be something that they would have a few people who would be interested, a few people in the know, and most other people would be, well, you need to explain that to me. I don't know what that is. And certainly, you know, when I spoke to Pete about it, we were kind of like, yeah, there isn't anything actually. So there's nothing that's just doing security and compliance, but it is a core pillar of what we do. And as you know, more and more people are buying into the higher level licensing, they're getting these capabilities, and they're not necessarily making the most of them. And I think when tail end of last year, there were conferences that had security and compliance tracks, and they were starting to have, you know, enough speakers, enough interest to have dedicated tracks just on the one subjects. So yeah, it must have been the start of the year, wasn't it, Pete?
Something like that.
Had a chat about it, and I think our first event was February.
Yeah, where you and I spoke on the inaugural event, and I must give you credit, Al, for the idea. The idea was yours. You came to me and said, "There's a gap here. And I was like, "Yeah, you're absolutely right. How come nobody's doing this?" And the reaction to it's been amazing. We've had some amazing community members participate so far with some great talks, which have taught me a lot. There's a lot that I've derived from it as well, for sure. So it's been fun. As we record this, we've got one coming up in a few days' time. When this episode goes out, it will have just happened a couple of days before. So breaking the fourth wall there. And but we were saying the other day, we can't believe how fast it's come around again. Actually, weren't we, Al? Because it's mad, I think.
Absolutely, and I think we've not had any trouble finding speakers who want to speak, and it's been a phenomenal list of speakers and sessions, but also the interest, the attendees, the conversations that are taking place in the chats. We don't record it because this subject changes quite a lot. It's constantly changing, but also we want to encourage people to have those conversations, to ask the questions, to participate as a user group usually used to be, when it was in person. The participation and the networking is really important. So I think it's been far more successful than we expected it to be when we started out at the start of the year. But yeah, we've got some amazing speakers lined up, and it's filled a gap, which is, I think, really good for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do, because it is a topic that I think I've attended all of them. And it is a topic I do see coming out quite a bit. Is this going to be recorded and things like that? And the decision is we're not going to record it. And just as, feedback, as an attendee, I kind of like that approach because, how would I describe it? I don't know if skin in the game is the right term, but it invests me more as an attendee because I have to focus on it. And I actually, if I want to get the value out of being here, because it's free at the end of the day, which is the fact that half of the stuff that happens in this community happens for free blows my mind anyway. But the fact that I'm sitting there and I know I have to pay attention if I want to learn about this, because I can't just go on YouTube and catch up later on.
Yeah, and I think, it's like the last session. I know you had a question for one of the speakers after the session, and he went off and did the research, during the user group, came back to you with an answer before the end of the user group, which, I think is, for me, that is community. I mean, for me, I started going to user groups to learn stuff. I very quickly recognized that actually the sessions are great, but actually having the conversations and meeting people and knowing who to ask about things, is equally as valuable. Knowing who to ask is the most powerful thing you can know, because I can then go to one of the speakers and say, well, you did a great session on Sentinel. Tice, can you answer a question? Sergey, you did that hacking session. Can I ask you a question about this? And people in the community are more likely to answer and to say, actually, absolutely, I'll help you wherever I can. It's the nature of the community. And I think that's, I'm passionate about the community because I've learned so much, and it's been a lifeline in so many times where you run into a challenge and you go, I just don't know the answer to this, and I don't know how to Google it because I don't know the words to how to ask it. You know what I mean? So you go, I do. I'm going to ask that person and just have a quick chat, explain what's going on, and they go, these are the phrases that you need to use, and these are the sites that you need to go to, or this blog, or this video. So massively important, I think.
I don't think you're
members
allowed
of the
to
community.
use,
Go on,
you're not allowed. You're not allowed to use Google, just for the record as well. So you've got to use Bing.
Bing,
I use Google as a verb, but actually Bing is my default browser. Yeah,
there you go.
But I do like. I mean, I think however you search, finding an answer is
using Bing. Kev would be proud of you.
I use Bing. I've used Bing for years.
Yeah, but you're right about the community in the sense that the type of people that are in it, and I feel this with myself, is when you're asked that sort of question, you're not happy until you've answered it. We're like a bee in our bonnet. We've got to go and we must find out this and get back to the person who's asking us, and that can come from the user groups and come from blogs that you do. And one thing I found recently with blog articles that I've written and forgotten about months ago, you'll occasionally get a comment on them saying, what's happening with this now? Or has there been a change? I better go back and update that, which I'm really bad at doing. But it's really, really good, the community for that sort of thing, without a doubt.
Kind of thinking a little bit more about the work you're doing, I mentioned the the user group space. You also, I believe, are the founder, I think, of the London Power Platform user group as well.
Oh, a helper on that one.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So I guess, from my perspective, I'm not a, how would you say it? I'm not a Power Platform guy. I'm not really in that space. How big of an area is that in Microsoft 365? And what kinds of subjects have you found that the user group has helped, I guess, educate you on?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think the Power Platform has been revolutionary for a lot of users, citizen developers, a lot of developers. But I think where it fits into sort of my story was obviously SharePoint had info paths, SharePoint workflows. It had its own sort of automation forms, extensibility for SharePoint. And then this weird Power Platform thing came out, Power Automate flows and stuff, and you kind of look at it and you go, well, actually, that's so much more powerful than what we had in the SharePoint stuff. And that's really where my interest started. Power BI for reporting, Power Automate, and it's always been really interesting in the Power Platform community because it's not really one community. There's multiple communities that are coming together, and if you conversations like, do I use SharePoint to store data? If people are coming from the SharePoint end, they'll go, well, obviously I use a SharePoint list to store data. If they're coming from the Dynamics end, they'll go, SharePoint, why? That's not relational data. Why would you use that? Why don't you use Dynamics or Dataverse or, something that actually makes sense to share data, to store data? And so you get this sort of collision of two sort of technical tribes coming together in the Power Platform space. And the Power Platform user group, when it's at its best, it's bringing both of those tribes together, and it's explaining actually, from a dynamic side, these are sort of some really cool features that you can use. The Dataverse is massively powerful. In my view, I've worked with SQL for over 20 years. SQL is great. Dataverse is better. SharePoint lists are great, but Dataverse is better. But actually, you can build a Canvas app that you can use on your phone that's got GPS and the ability to take pictures, which a custom dev solution would take a long time to build, right. And wouldn't be necessarily quite as agile to build and deliver, a lot more planning, a lot more investment. So you get this rapid ability to build solutions, and you have the ability for people who understand a business process to actually build solutions to improve that business process. And those people are coming at it from a business perspective. I have this process. I spend 3 days a month doing this. Can I make this quicker so that it takes only a day a month? Excellent. That's going to save me 10 days a year. That's probably quite an investment in time that you would make to build something. But then they're looking at it going, well, what else can I do? I'm looking at this process, but are there other things that I can do? So the Power Platform user group is really about bringing together, is it somebody who's coming from a SharePoint background who wants to automate a process? Is it somebody who's coming from a Dynamics background that wants to understand what a Canvas app will be able to deliver or what Power BI can do? Is it somebody who's, working in Teams and wants to know what Dataverse for Teams can do? There are different flavors of the Power Platform, and there's a flavor to suit every sort of background, every direction of travel that you're on. But sometimes communicating that is a real challenge for a lot of organizations to really get that message down to the people who can really benefit from it. So I think there's, the potential to educate across those different tribes and across those different levels of experience is really valuable. And the Power Platform user group, we get probably more business focused people who want to automate their processes than any other user group I've been to, where it tends to be more technical sort of consultants and people like that. So it's a really interesting space to be involved in.
And do you have speakers at that one in the same way that we do in the security compliance one now?
Yeah, we've we're jump starting it again. The whole platform for managing it has been changing. So yes, we do have a sessionalized page which will be launching again. But yes, we do have speakers from all sorts of different backgrounds. And again, that one was an in-person one. And I remember, the last in-person one we kind of did it as hybrid, and it was quite an interesting experience, doing some physical hacks around the audio visual to make sure that people could actually experience it both online and in person. So yeah, we're kind of looking at, does that stay online? Does it move back in? We used to run it in the Reactor in London. Or are there other opportunities for us to do more of a hybrid solution? But yes, same kind of format, couple of speakers, usually trying to get a sort of a use case in, somebody coming and doing a show and tell of a solution that they've built, a use that they've got for the Power Platform.
Cool. And when you say we, who are your co-organizers on that group?
We've got Laura Graham Brown, Peter Beenstra, and Keith Watling. So together, the four of us have been looking after that user group, and trying to make sure that we are still doing things. And as I say, we're going to be jump starting it again in the autumn, and making sure that we've got a good lineup of speakers in that space.
Nice.
Yeah, awesome. Top names involved there. That's highly recommend that you check that out. Then you'll have to let us know when you're relaunching, and we can link to that.
Yep.
Yeah,
Definitely.
we will do. Yeah.
One of the things just I'd like to pick up there is you mentioned that maybe, for example, the security and compliance user group, you're getting more technically minded folks, and then in the Power Platform one, you're maybe getting more business minded folks. When we talk about that, and we talk about these low code, no code citizen developer platforms, are you seeing that it's still someone who is in the kind of IT business area? Or are we talking about folks that are really across all sorts of the business area? So, for example, are you seeing the Power Platform being used by actual folks they're in the finance team and they're not really part of the IT team? Just as an example.
Yeah, I think it depends on the organization and their understanding of the Power Platform. And I think there's a lot. IT departments have had a lot of fear around it. It's the new access databases. They're going to be sitting under every desk, and we're not going to know who's doing what and where the critical business processes are going to be. And that's been a fear since day one for some IT departments. But there is, the Centre of Excellence that has been out there for quite a while now to help manage and to track and to govern. And there's a lot of education needs to be done around what the governance looks like around it to enable different organizations to then roll it out and say, we do know that we've got citizen developers who they are enabled, and they need governance. They need some guidance as to what to use when, and to know what's available, and to be inspired by what they can do. But they do need that kind of arm around them that, Champions Network will give them, to say, if you've got a question, where do you go? Because otherwise, very often, in half a day, I can do a lot, but then I'm going to struggle to do something else, and I'm going to spend 3 days trying to work out how to do it, and then I'm going to give up. So you need that support if you're going to be rolling it out and enabling the citizen developers to use it. But the other end of the spectrum is line of business applications that are being built that using Azure to surface APIs, then hooking into that with Power Automate or Canvas apps, integrating with model-driven apps. And those line of business applications, they can have the full application lifecycle management there, the governance, the data loss prevention, all of that in place. And that opens up a whole new way of building applications for an organization. So you get these two kind of extremes. And most organizations are focusing on one or the other. And, it's part of what we're trying to do with the Power Platform is to make it that you can enable both ends of that. And you can say, actually, I've got these APIs that allow my citizen developers to get information they need, trusted information, use it, automate their processes, make things better and faster for themselves. And and give them the satisfaction of actually building and creating things. Whilst having that governance and knowing things are being used, when to retire things, when to, lock down on things, how to manage new capabilities, things like AI Builder and those sorts of tools that just open up, mind-blowing potential for users. And when they have never thought, well, I could actually scan a document and extract the information out of it, and then I could put it into, SharePoint, or put it into Dynamics or Dataverse. That kind of scenario is something that a lot of people just don't really think about, and they need the education. So Power Platform, often we talk about the center of excellence being both a technical solution, but also being a people-focused solution. How do I actually engage my users and build a champions network? How do I train people? Have those, essentially an internal user group, knowledge sharing. Where have we used this? Where has it saved us time? Inspiring other areas of the business to use it. So there's a massive potential with it, but it takes a different way of thinking about technology almost to actually roll it out to those users who maybe haven't been focused on building things, and at the same time to a really technical audience.
Power Platform is increasingly difficult to ignore. I find it's tying into so many other aspects of Microsoft 365. As you said there, it's tying into SharePoint, into Teams, into the Dynamics 365. And excuse me, sorry, losing my voice today. Also into things like security and compliance, even, because if you look at the Power Platform Admin Center, there's a strong focus on that in there, with things like the DLP that you have to consider as well. So it's only going to run and get bigger and better.
Yeah, I mean, it's the conversation I've had with a lot of people is, where you have workflows, you're thinking about taking one thing and automating it, but actually the Power Platform, you can orchestrate things. It's orchestration across multiple platforms, multiple systems. I want to integrate with my Salesforce system. Okay, well, the Power Platform can do that. It can bring data from, your Salesforce platform, your Microsoft 365 platform, pull them together, present them, allow you to see them together, and then take action on it as well. And it can do it all in one interface, which is a really powerful tool for a lot of organizations. We'd look at Microsoft's integration sort of approach. You look at Viva and bringing in HR systems and bringing all of that data together and using it, learning to bring in learning management systems. It's not reinventing the wheel to make it all Microsoft. It's saying, we know you've got loads of other solutions that are in place. How can I bring them together? Which I think is massively exciting to say, I can bring everything together. I can take my security notification and, push a message into Teams so that the team who look after it understand it's there.
One of the concerns that you raised there that some IT folks have about the Power Platform, and maybe cloud platforms in general, and I've seen it especially with the acceleration of the adoption of Teams, is that idea of governance. How do we make sure we've kind of got control over what's sitting in our environment, and we're planning for it as users come and go and they leave and everything like that. And that made me think of one of the blogs that you wrote recently. I'm not sure how long. I think it was within the last year. And that was around this idea of access reviews. So I'm thinking about identity governance in this case. So if governance is such a key concern to folks, thinking about the identity piece, as folks move from on-prem and they're used to, federating between domains and all that kind of stuff. When we use Azure AD, that kind of goes out the window, and we've got guest users and external users and all that kind of stuff. I guess, where do you think that folks should start getting that control that they feel they might be losing as they start adopting these cloud solutions?
I think Azure AD it has so many tools that are underused. And I think the access reviews was something that, I remember using that 2-3 years ago with a client, and they were just blown away by it. They just had no idea that was available. And at that point, we were working with IT, but we were talking to the end users who were managing a system where they had to collaborate with external people. And they'd been doing it, the on-prem SharePoint way, and they had an external AD that was being created with accounts, and they were just like, well, we've got to go to IT every time. And when we then said, well, actually, look, you can do this in Teams. You can add users in, but then we could put access reviews on there, so you can actually recertify people as needing access. and you don't need to go to IT for that. You can delegate some of that down from IT. They were just like, whoa, okay, this is pretty amazing. I know when we said to them, you can get that done by external people as well. And your external people can actually be that first line of authentication or of approval. And then it can come to you. Yeah. It was a double whammy. They just kind of went, we'd never thought of asking them to approve somebody to come into our system. But actually, you're right. They're the people who are assigning that person in their organization the job to actually come in and use our stuff. And that thought process was something that they hadn't even considered. And I think that's where, the identity governance is so powerful in Office 365 and in Azure AD. And starting with being able to audit who comes in, being able to put in the conditional access policies to say, actually, my perimeter is my identity. That's where I would be starting and saying, nobody can come into my environment without coming through that identity firewall. It's not a firewall, it's an identity perimeter, isn't it? I need to authenticate and come through. If you've got your checks and balances in there to say, I can audit when people authenticate, I can put in conditional access to impose multi-factor authentication on them. We've got terms of use so that we've got them signing up that they're going to actually adhere to our rules. But then you've got access reviews to say, do they still need access? You've got entitlements, which is even more powerful, to say we can give them access to applications, to Teams, to SharePoint locations, and we can then say all of that set of security permissions is bundled together as an entitlement, and they can actually come along and do self-service and go, actually, I've just started in a new role. I need to actually have access to the sales tools. Okay, I've got an entitlement for that. They sign up, their line manager approves it, then maybe somebody else approves it, and then that's under constant review.
Yep.
That's really where organizations should be thinking that's what they need to achieve, is using those entitlements in that way, because that way they're not kind of going, oh, I've just joined a new organization. Pete joined a couple of weeks before me. I just need the same permissions as Pete, please.
Yeah,
exactly. And that's where IT kind of go, what permissions did we give him?
Yeah.
How do I find out what permissions he's got across, my Salesforce environment, my Microsoft environment, my Azure environment? What permissions do I need? And I think that's really, that would be the utopia, wouldn't it? I come along and I've just got entitlements managing all permissions.
I love that you mentioned the entitlement management, because I think back to kind of when I was in internal IT, really before widespread adoption of, because it's an Azure AD Premium P2 feature, before we had that available. And I think back to the big checklist we've got of, new start needs this, tick, 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 cross. Whereas now it's just kind of like you set it up once, and in a way, as an IT guy, you can set it and forget it. That's maybe not the best terminology, but you can then start delegating it away, right? And you could say, okay, well, now the HR team can have responsibility for this.
And of course, you set up a Power Platform solution, with an app that they fill in that request, and then it automatically goes through the approval. Of course, you set through all of that, yeah. But yeah, I think this is where a lot of organizations have an identity management tool in place. They may have had a tool, Forefront Identity Manager, Microsoft Identity Manager, all of these tools that kind of pull all the identities from other systems, from HR systems, and then push them into, well, actually, that application needs these people in there. That application AD needs it. Every organization has probably thought about it in some way, but maybe kind of they've been a bit scared and not necessarily implemented an automated solution to manage it all.
Yep, absolutely. Shifting gears just a little bit, but again, focusing on your blog, something I've seen you, I guess, talk about not only on your blog, but also on Twitter and things like that. I've seen that you kind of, you write and speak a lot about habits, I guess, improving yourself, mental health, all that kind of thing. And I know that one of the articles you published on your blog was about building good habits. And you referenced a number of books by folks like Cal Newport and James Clear and all that kind of stuff. What are the kind of big pieces of advice that you would direct towards IT professionals when it comes to building and maintaining good habits? No pressure.
Well, yeah, I was going to say no pressure at all. I think one of the things that I've always struggled with is saying no, which means that I end up with a lot of things to do. I've always kind of gone, oh yeah, I'm happy to help. Which you build up a backlog of things that you need to do. So managing those and prioritizing those has always been a key element, and being able to say no, and to say no, I can't do it now, I can maybe do it next week, is really important for us. And then to be able to say, actually, look, here's how you can find out when I can do something next. It's getting to be a standing joke with focus time. I book focus time in to do things, and then people seem to think that I've put focus time in as and they read it as he's reserved time for me to book a meeting in there. And it's kind of like,
yeah,
it's not quite the right interpretation. But I think all of the things that I have learned, I'm a massive reader in terms of reading books or listening to books when I'm exercising or doing, going out walking. And I found so much useful information that helps manage, the stress of having things to do, those tasks that you kind of go, they're going to wake you up in the middle of the night. You're thinking about it, and I didn't really want to wake up in the middle of the night thinking about it. And that's really driven me, to work out how to use these tools well and effectively. And I think, when it comes to habits, they are very personal. They're how we all work. But from an IT perspective, enabling the technology and making sure people understand that the technology is there is absolutely crucial. Some of the most revelationary things that I've shown people have been the most simple. Find time. How can I book a meeting and send out 7 different time slots and let people vote on them so that I know which one's going to work for people? Oh, that saves me so much time. I don't have to go through their calendars and have that ping pong of sending emails going, well, are you available on this date? No, I'm not available on that date. What about the other 7 people who are going to be in the meeting? So some of those tools are some of the most life-changing when it comes to how you manage your time, but also they help you to manage your own expectations and to manage expectations of others. I've got my calendar, it's all up to date. I know when I need to be doing things. I've got all my tasks in to do. I know what tasks I need to be doing. And bringing the tools together into habits and ceremonies and things like that to kind of make it so you're using them. That's the most important thing, using them on a regular basis and not kind of going, I'm going to put everything into to do, then I'm going to leave it for a week, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to look at it. I'm going to be somewhat shocked that I haven't actually done any of the tasks that are there, but I've done this whole other set that actually weren't in there. And I think it's hard. It's not easy to manage all of that. And depending on what your role is, it really varies as to how impactful that would be on you. If you're getting project managers assigning stuff to you, that might be in a project management tool. It might be in their own Excel spreadsheet. Hopefully it's in Planner or something that you can actually see that work. And that helps to manage your own time. But also, I think the most important thing is managing expectations of others. So they know, actually he's busy. He's not busy, just sat on his own, having a nap. He's busy doing something that somebody else has asked him to do.
Yeah, we use Find Time a lot for this show. Ironically, we didn't use it to invite you on, Al, which because I just said to you yesterday, you fancy coming on? You said, sure, and we'll do it then. But pretty much every other guest we've had so far, we used Find Time to line up our diaries, and it works brilliantly, absolutely brilliantly. But those other technologies that you mentioned there, I've started trying to use them more effectively myself recently, having recently changed roles into a new company, and started booking in focus time, booking in also time to take a break, to have lunch, to respond to emails, because what I am finding increasingly is, and I'm sure you'll find the same, we're having so many Teams meeting after Teams meeting after Teams meeting, and there is just no time to actually take action on what you've discussed in those meetings. Before you know it, your day's gone, and that's where that's so important, isn't it?
Yeah, and I've started in Outlook. You can change the meeting times to say, make them slightly shorter. So take 5 minutes off them, and I was taking 5 minutes off the end. And they'd just overrun by 5 minutes, and then you'd be in the same position that you have to actually just jump over to the next meeting. So I've started taking 5 minutes off the start of the meetings, and it's really interesting because it's really hard. I keep starting them on the top of the hour, and I'm like, oh no, I'm 5 minutes early, or other people are starting them on the top of the hour because we're just not kind of geared to think it might be starting at 5 past or 10 past. So it's taken quite a lot to kind of get into the discipline of, no, it's starting later. This is when I should be going to the toilet or going to get a coffee or just having a little walk around. But as you say, it's that focus time. When are you actually going to do the preparation or the follow-up from a meeting? Yeah, you need to book that time in and be hard on saying, I'm not going to accept a meeting in. Look, I've got a meeting already in there. Can you not see that in my calendar? Oh, you can't see it? Oh, let me share my calendar with you and make sure you can see my calendar.
Yeah, and I'm starting to try and do that as well because it's essential. You've got focus time does not mean I'm free. It doesn't mean I'm doing nothing. It means exactly what it says, and it's essential. But one problem I have as well is when you got back-to-back Teams meetings, is getting off that Teams meeting when you're chatting with other people and they need something from you and say, well, I've got another one coming up now. I've got to go, but then they just keep on talking to you and
that 5 minute warning that comes up at the end, I always point that out. I was just to point out we've 5 minutes left on this meeting, so we best wrap it up now because I've got another meeting, even if I don't have another meeting, and I think use that and vocalize that because everybody's going to see it, but they're not necessarily going to be doing something because that pop-up comes up. So I would always suggest vocalizing it and saying, oh, just in the 5 minute meeting, 5 minutes left. What are the next steps? What are the actions? Let's bring this to a close.
I love that because it's so easy to ignore that, isn't it? I think everyone perhaps has got into the habit of just knowing that's going to pop up and say, oh, okay, we'll just ignore that and keep talking.
Yeah.
Let's call it out.
Change the color of it or do something. Because if things happen every time, people just start to ignore it. But always vocalize that one when that comes up.
I do love insights, though. I've been trying to use that from a mental health standpoint as well to try and do. I mean, a few people who've talked to on the show have said exactly the same. At first glance, the breathing thing, this is a bit gimmicky, but everyone we've talked to who's tried it, including myself, has been very pleasantly surprised to how beneficial it is, how much it works.
That 1 minute breathing. It's only 1 minute. It fits in between your meetings, doesn't it? And it just and relax and put to bed the last meeting and start the next meeting. It's remarkable how effective it is. But and the rest of the Headspace stuff will be coming out soon. But I do like the end of the day, the virtual commute, because that's bringing in all your to-do tasks that you've put into My Day. It helps reinforce the use of that My Day list in to do, which I think is really, it's coming together, but there's not enough done around the habits around it, the ceremonies, the process of using it. It's just the technology.
But we're in very early days of using it, aren't we? It's very early days, and we just had Microsoft Inspire a week or so back, didn't we? And there was more announcements there about integrations with new partners for Viva, Insights, and that sort of thing. So that's exciting. It's only going to get better and better, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, we're at the start. We're at the start of a journey, and it's it will be very interesting to see in a year's time, how we're all working and what tools we have to actually support us there, because I think it will be slightly different, won't it? Hybrid working. How many of us are actually on site, not on site? How we change our working habits based on some of the research that Microsoft's doing around its Work Trend Index and Work Lab and those things. I mean, they're such amazing resources to have a look at.
And one of the other big announcements that came out of Inspire was Windows 365, of course, which I think is massively exciting. What were your thoughts on that, Al?
So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that's rolled out and adopted. I think there's, having previously spent many years doing a lot of traveling and a lot of train rides, and thinking you need to be connected for it, that might not work for a fair chunk of people. But for those people who are, I would say, in quotes, office based, as in they're either going to be working at home or they're going to be working somewhere where they've got internet connectivity and not working in transit, it might be really interesting to see how that plays out, because I think it will make life a lot easier for a lot of organizations, and it will take away one further removal of things that need to be supported. But I also think there'll be a lot of people who go, well, that'd be great, I could just fire it up on my iPad wherever I am. I don't need to have that laptop
on your Mac
anywhere. And I think it'll be very interesting to see how it plays out.
Definitely. I never thought about it from the train point of view. It's just because Wi-Fi on trains is notoriously bad at the best of times, isn't it? So it's really not going to work there, is it?
No, I mean, I used to always use trains as an excuse to go into airplane mode and just get my head down, and actually it'd be the most productive couple of hours on a train, because it would be like being on an airplane. So we'll see. It'll be interesting to see how that works out for us.
Yeah,
certainly will.
Have they announced pricing for Windows 365 yet? I don't think they have they?
I think it's coming in August sometime, isn't it?
Right. So. Okay. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see, because it is interesting that it's a bit of a meme on Twitter now that we're kind of the E7 license is going to show up at any given moment and things like that. But it seems to me that what instead is happening is E3 and E5, they seem to be settled, but then you're getting these additional things that are either pay by consumption or an additional cost per users. Windows 365 being another. And then I believe most of the Viva stuff, that also invokes an additional charge. Is that right?
Yeah, so Viva Insights and Topics, SharePoint Syntex. I mean, they've got the scheduler thing as well, that was released, which is what was Cortana or Calendar.help, which was quite a useful little tool. So there seems to be a few things coming out, but then again, Power Platform, they've halved the price from October.
Right,
which will be a massive benefit for a lot of organizations, not to have that conversation of, well, where is the value? So I think it'd be interesting to see E7. That would be painful.
Yeah, if they do go down that route, I hope they don't announce it too soon, because I've got a blog post that's going to drop on Practical 365 in the coming week, where we debate a tweet that I started recently about E3 versus E5 and what features in E5 would be more appropriately redistributed to E3 and that sort of thing. The response to it was quite amazing. I thought, oh, there's a blog post in this. So, but as you can imagine, everyone had a different idea on it. There were some common themes, but nearly every feature that's in E5 was mentioned at some point. People just wanted in E3. So what's Microsoft to do?
I think the step-ups have been really useful to E5, where you've got the compliance and the security step-ups. I think that's always been I remember when E5 was released and we all went, telephony. Okay, well, that's quite a big sell. You've got to replace hardware for that. That's end of life for hardware that's going to trigger that. Over the years, that end of life has kind of come around for a lot of organizations, and so therefore they've kind of made that jump. But when you look at the security and compliance side of things, it should be a no-brainer for any regulated organization. But there's a lot of competes out there with existing tools, and I think that's part of the challenge, isn't it? That anything that is a compete for existing tools has a lot more discussion around it. But anything that is new, the Viva stuff, well, you've never had that before. The Viva Insight stuff is just phenomenal, the information that you get out of it. But so it's never going to be rolled into an E5. Well, at least I don't think it's going to be rolled into E5 because it is, some organizations will want it and not everybody will want it.
And the telephony is becoming massive right now. A couple of years ago, there was really no traction on that. It wasn't mature enough. But now, certainly where Rue and I work, the demand for that is insane.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the meeting rooms and the Teams meeting rooms, the hardware that supports that is, there's an awful lot going on, especially as we're all thinking about how we participate in meetings more as well.
Yeah, definitely. Do you remember the E4 SKU?
I don't remember the E4 SKU. No.
Yeah, there was one. I don't think it was around very long, but there definitely was an E4 at one point.
I don't
in my
remember
early
that.
days of working with 365. I hope I'm not imagining that. Did I dream
I think you're right. There was.
I'm sure that existed.
There definitely was one that then got revoked. So I can't remember the name of it. But yeah, it's changing.
That was a thing before E5 appeared. Microsoft do like to change things, don't they?
Life would be dull if we did.
It would, wouldn't
kept
it?
on our toes trying
good.
to. It's a good thing they changed the name of things because it allows you to age blog articles. It's still talking about Dataverse. Excellent. So Dataverse is good. It's talking about Common Data Service. Oh, well, that was renamed when. So yeah, and it also gives a lot of pub quiz questions. When you're talking about Microsoft themed pub quiz, well, what was this called before it changed to that?
Yeah. Well, they did that in Advanced eDiscovery not too long ago, where searches is now collections, for example. That's a recent example. So I think searches was a much better. I don't quite get that, but whatever. I'm sure there's some wisdom behind it. But looking at the time, we've had a good old chat, as we always do with our guests. We're 1 minute and 11 in, but I do want to spend a bit of time talking a bit more on a personal level. What does Alan Eardley like to do in his spare time, if you have any, outside of your work and community life?
So I have a desperate need to have some time that's not sat in front of my laptop. So yeah. Spend time with the family, but I like to go out for walks. So I live in the Chilterns, so going out for walks and hikes around here is always very therapeutic. I kind of hit 2 birds with 1 stone. Listen to audiobooks, go out and see beautiful countryside, come back refreshed and slightly more knowledge in my head, which is awesome.
Nice.
But yeah, I also do field archery. Which ironically is not in a field. We do it in woods. So I do that with my daughter, and we go and basically shoot arrows. Which is incredibly relaxing because there's no IT, there's no technology, there's no mobile signal, but also it kind of gets you into that state where you're focusing just enough on something that nothing else can come into your brain and disturb you. So it's really nice. She's just finished her GCSEs. It's nice for us to kind of escape from her studying, me working, and actually just really kind of unwind and relax. So yeah,
awesome.
That's awesome. That's what we like doing.
Yeah, I know who to stick with now when the zombie apocalypse happens. So
yeah, well, it's it's quite nice because we don't actually have to hit the targets very much, but it's not like so if you think about archery and people lining up and shooting a range of targets from one line, it's not like that. It's more like doing a round of golf. So there are 14 targets, but they're different sizes and different distances, and some of them you kind of have 1 arrow at each distance as you walk up towards the target. So it really is quite engrossing in terms of concentration, and quite satisfying when you do actually hit the target.
Right.
I did archery at Centre Parks a couple of years ago. Actually, it was great fun. Also in a forest, of course. Centre Parks being full of trees as it is, but great fun. But sorry, what were you going to say?
I was just wondering, is this something that you can do competitively, or is it very much a leisure activity? Is it? Right.
No, you can do it competitively. So my daughter actually holds a national record in it.
Cool.
When she was very young, but just because of this type of bow that she uses and the type of target. So they've got different styles of targets. So and they also do 3D targets. So sort of rubber animals that you can shoot as well. So there's all sorts. It's really interesting. Really worth looking up the Field Archery Association and seeing whether there's a club near you, because it's a lot of fun.
Cool.
Awesome. And you mentioned your daughter's just done her GCSEs. How was that in COVID times? What was that like in terms of disruption? Because the previous year 11 last year, when the pandemic hit, they didn't get to do their exams. So how did she find
So
that this year?
they did assessments this year, which weren't really exams, but they were
Right.
under exam conditions. But she's taken to it pretty well. Her school was using Teams, and so really just moved over to using Teams full time. And she's done remarkably well adjusting to, using the tools that she has available to her to study, but also, staying in contact with her friends. And so unlike some, she's quite introverted and is quite happy just to sit in her bedroom and it's either study or socialize.
Whether you're introverted or not, though, and my older son George probably falls into that category. It's been difficult for all of the children. The consistency that has not been there. 1 minute they're going to school for a few weeks, then they're not. They're in lockdown again. Then they're going back, but then one of their friends has had to self-isolate, and it's just been stop and start. And I can't imagine that at that age what they've had to go through, and they've coped with it so well, haven't they?
They have, and I think it's credit to them, and it's credit to the schools and the teachers for getting through what are very challenging situations. To being 16 is probably exactly the right time, if there was a right time. When you're doing GCSEs, all of those distractions and the temptations have kind of been removed to a certain extent. So, there's at that point, it's probably less of an impact than, younger kids where, they're still, really needing to actually develop friendships, develop the social interactions, where it's going to be a whole lot more difficult, and where their attention isn't necessarily, going to be as easily focused on something when they're at home, compared with if they're in school with a teacher telling them to do something and telling them to work. So I think it's had different impacts on different age groups. Only time will tell as to what the longer term impacts of actually going to be.
Yeah, definitely. Who knows? I mean, it's probably, unfortunately, their generation who are going to have to go through the harder times of paying back all of the furlough debt as well, isn't it? And things like that. It's scary times. But I mean, we've coped so well with it, though, that most people have, and most people have just banded together and just got on with it and made things work. It's a testament to the human spirit on the whole, I think. Absolutely.
I think we do have the technology to get through it, which is the other the other silver lining, is that we've got the technology. If you imagine what it would have been like without stable collaboration tools or video calling tools, it would have been a whole
20 years ago.
Absolutely. Even 10 years ago, it would have been completely different.
So true. But anyway, we must talk films. Rue, over to you.
Yeah, I guess no beating about the bush here. Obligatory question. In terms of, which is the better movie? We both know the answer, but I'll ask it anyway. Terminator 1 or Terminator 2?
So I'm of an age where Terminator 1 was available on pirate video to watch, when I was way too young to be watching it. And Terminator 2 was, end of the teenage years, going out and going to the cinema. So both have a special place in my heart. I can remember the cinema that I went to see Terminator 2.
Cool.
But Terminator 1 wins. Because I think it's
I thought I had you there, and then you pulled the rug from under me.
No.
Yeah.
As a horror
one might
film,
be edging into the lead now, maybe.
It might be, yeah. Blimey.
It was innovative. It was a horror film, and watching it and being really excited. Oh yeah, we're going to watch an 18. Excellent. And it's it's brilliant.
It's always funny when you're at that age and you're kind of, there's that little I don't know how you describe it, but that sensation you get when you know you shouldn't be watching something because the BBFC said you're not allowed to watch it. And I remember the first movie I snuck into the cinema to see that had an age rating on it. I think it might have been Spider-Man or something like that. And I was like 10 and it was a 12 or something ridiculous like that. But I just thought, yeah, badass. You know what I mean?
Oh, was that one of the Tobey Maguire Spider-Mans?
Yes, it was the very first Spider-Man. I'm pretty sure it was that. It was either that or Tomb Raider. I can't remember which one of those.
Oh,
was the
good
first.
God! And you were 10.
Something like that, yeah, 10 or 11,
Yeah.
I guess.
I feel so old.
I think that's interesting, though, isn't it? The question about the Terminator 1 and Terminator 2 is, were you alive when Terminator 1 came out and old enough to actually watch it when it was,
that's a good question.
revolutionary and new and fresh, or
I'm
not?
just Googling it. Or sorry, I'm just binging it. So the first Terminator was 1984. And the second one was 1991. So there's quite a gap between there. But yeah, so I wasn't born when either of them came out, actually. Just looking at it. So but yeah, closer to Terminator 2.
You're born 92, right?
I was born at the end of 91.
91, right.
Yeah, well, I say the end of September, so that's 2 months after Terminator 2 came out. So yeah, maybe that's just it. Maybe Terminator 2 is a 90s kids film or something like that.
Oh, I don't know.
Maybe.
I mean, it's always interesting, with my daughter. She looks at anything and goes, "Oh, that's really old. That's really dated. I'm not going to watch that." And you look at Terminator 1, you go, "Well, the special effects aren't really all that, are they? They haven't stood up to the test of time." You look at the special effects in Terminator 2, and they actually have stood up pretty well.
Yeah,
and
totally.
that was always Terminator 2. The buzz was the special effects. Terminator 1, it was the horror, it was the violence, it was the actually, this is actually just generally quite shocking, which is why it was such a big hit. And that's a
lot of people have said about the horror, haven't they? Kat Green, who's a massive fan of it. She said, "Yeah, it's a horror movie. That's why I love it so much." So it's a very good point. But any other film passions? Any franchises that you gravitate towards, like Star Wars or Star Trek or Bond? Anything?
Yeah, I love the Star Wars stuff. But I do love the Star Trek stuff as well. But yeah, for me, I like sci-fi is really both books and films. So things like Blade Runner, Alien. Alien is an awesome set of films. So yeah, but yeah, got all of the Star Wars ones.
Yeah,
even the prequels.
Even the prequels. To me how I get maybe it's just a thing across the whole planet, but in our field of IT, Star Wars and Star Trek and sci-fi, why do they go so hand in hand with the IT industry? I don't know, maybe it's just me, but folks seem to kind of, within IT, almost always be interested in either one of those. Just an observation, and I don't know if that's just because everyone in the world is interested in either of them, but IT folks seem to gravitate towards them.
Well, maybe, is it the technology?
Could be.
It could be, definitely. Yeah, you're all right though. There is a high proportion of people who work in tech. You just see on Twitter sometimes you'll see somebody posting about one of those genres or posting a picture of themselves wearing a Star Wars T-shirt. So yeah, I mean, I had one on the other week on the podcast. It's very rare that I don't wear all black, but I could find. But
yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? I think sci-fi generally is. From an IT, what was I watching last night? Johnny Mnemonic, terrible film.
Oh wow, it was an awful film.
But William Gibson, great story. But it was very interesting because at one point, they're doing stuff that's in virtual reality with essentially a HoloLens on. And you kind of think, wait a second, this was made 25 years ago and they've got a HoloLens. How did they get that before? And I think some of the sci-fi things, the predictive nature of sci-fi, always used to be, if one thing is different, then it's science fiction, isn't it? As opposed to science fact. So the genres that we like, whether it's sort of the more fantastical or the more sort of predictive, the William Gibson cyberpunk type stuff, Neil Stephenson. I mean, it's just, you could kind of read it and go, that I can see that happening. I can see how we could get to that point. And I think that's probably why a lot of IT people are into certain genres of science fiction, because it is inspirational as to, well, actually, how many times have you heard Inception referenced or Minority Report? Oh, look, that looks like Minority Report interface. Those are the sorts of, I guess, concepts that people kind of hook onto and go, we should develop Minority Report, so we can just move things around, or I think it's
Inception's one of my very
inspiration.
favorites. Love Inception. It's just got everything you want. It's a Christopher Nolan film. It's got an amazing cast. It's got the Hans Zimmer soundtrack, which you just can't beat a bit of Zimmer.
Yeah,
Absolutely love it.
Yep.
But,
absolutely.
here's an interesting one though. If you had to, what would you choose? Star Trek or Star Wars?
Oh, I would choose Star Wars.
Yeah, I don't know. I think if you asked me that on a different day of the week, the answer would change.
Oh, really?
I really don't know. Depends what mood I'm in, I guess.
I think Star Wars, because it is just a classic story. It's it's a fairy tale, but set in a completely alternate universe. Star Trek, you'd then be saying, well, which one?
That's true. So many of them, isn't there?
You've got far more sort of. Oh well, I would choose the original as the least likely to be the favorite, but the latest one, Discovery, is the most likely to be a favorite, and that would probably depend on the day of the week that you're being asked.
Exactly. No, you're probably right from that point of view. I think Star Wars has to win it, doesn't it? But you're so right. I mean, it's even within Star Wars, it's so divisive about people who, born at a certain time, love the prequels. More original fans can't stand them, and even the newer ones, the sequels, they're called out by a lot of more traditional fans and prequel fans for being too. What's the word I'm looking for? Too box ticking, which is a controversial point in itself. But for me, for my sins, I love them all. And some people say to me, "What, really? The prequels?" And
but you didn't give me the chance to say I love them all, did you?
But, no, I didn't. No,
you said you had
I'm
to
rambling on. I'm rambling on. So what's your take on that?
I think Star Wars, but I can watch them all. I watched all of the Star Trek ones, and my family were just like, "Why are you watching this? It's terrible." It's like, this is classic 60s TV. Look at the special effects and the the sets that they've got. I mean, this is brilliant, isn't it? It's culturally important. Even if it is offensive in many, many ways to many, many different people, but it is culturally, culturally influential, and I think that's part of Star Trek, is that the culture, the firsts that it had, really valuable in terms of the ground that it broke.
Oh, completely. And a lot of it hasn't aged well, but for the time, it was progressive in the 60s. Some of the ideas it had, for example, the first ever episode, the pilot, The Cage, it highlights the point that it's unusual to have a woman on the bridge.
Let alone a coloured woman. It had the first multiracial kiss, didn't it?
Exactly. But and now we've quite rightly got women of color, female leads of Star Trek shows, which is it's great to see how far we've come. It really is.
It is
fantastic. But anyhow, before we wind things up, I want to thank you for your time, Al. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. We'll be speaking again very soon because we've got our user group, little plug there for the security and compliance user group on Wednesday. Although it's pointless because it'll already happen by the time this drops.
Last Wednesday of every month.
Last Wednesday of every month. That's exactly. I'm waffling so much today. I do that sometimes. But before we go, anything else you'd like to say to our audience, and how can they reach you if they want to get in touch?
So I'm on Twitter at Al_Eardley. I'm on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out and come along to a user group. Doesn't have to be ours. Just go to any user group or any of the free conferences and say hi. Just meet people. That's the most valuable thing that any community event can do, is to introduce you to people. Yeah,
and watch GreyHatBeard because it's awesome.
Yeah, and that as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. Cracking. Well, let's wind things up. Thanks to everyone for joining us. We have been Cloud Conversations. This is Rue. I'm Pete. Our wonderful guest, Al. Check us out on Twitter at Cloud, Rue, and Pete. Give us a like on YouTube and a subscribe, and we will catch you down the road on the next show. Take care.
Cheers, guys.